I am Randy Horton, Chief Solutions Officer at Orthogonal. On behalf of myself and Bernhard Kappa, CEO of Orthogonal, and Buddy Smith, Director of Technical Consulting at our friends and partners at MedSec. We want to welcome you all. Excited to have you here. It's a really good turnout today. So thanks for logging in, taking time out of your busy schedules. We don't take it for granted. And thanks to our guest today, Kjetil Holstad from Nordic Semiconductor. As many of you know, we've been doing these webinars monthly for a long time, really trying to create value and convene experts from medical device manufacturers and other tech firms. And our goal is to really share best practices so that we can all accelerate improving patient outcomes faster. As I like to say, each of us can't possibly work on every medical device that one of our relatives will need. So it really behooves us all to share what we know that works. Our goal for today is to really give you a lot of timely and actionable discussion. Hopefully you walk away with a minimum of a couple of gold nuggets in your pocket you can use in your own work. We specifically don't make this a sales pitch for any of our firms. That said, feel free to reach out to Orthogonal on medical device software development, MedSec on medical device security, and Nordic on wireless hardware or other products and services that will be described later. So basically, we promise to get you in and out of here if you need in 50 minutes. So we will cover kind of our core conversation as well as try and field some questions along the way. That said, if there's more questions, we'll stay on for a while. We can even stay till half past. And frequently we find that it does actually go another 15, 20, 30 minutes longer. And actually about 40% of the people stay all the way to the very end consistently for each one of these webinars, which is great. Some of you gave us questions before when you registered for the webinar. We've got those down. Some of you, please, or many of you, please submit questions in the Q&A here. Now that we're getting going, we will try to answer them as we go. If they're too specific, we may take it offline, but we will try and get everything in. And really, you should leave here feeling like we've packed 4 hours of content into 50 minutes. So this is the final in our series of webinars and blogs that we've been doing this year together with MedSec. This is actually our sixth webinar, and I'm really excited about this one because all the other webinars so far today have been very tactical. If you're going to use Bluetooth to connect a proprietary physical medical device to a consumer smartphone and an app, what are the best practices for doing that in terms of software architecture, hardware, software connections, regulatory, quality, obscure edge cases, all those things. We've covered that pretty well now. So today we're going to really ask a different question, which is what is wireless going to look like for medical devices 5 to 10 years from now? Let's take a step back because every year there's incremental improvements, but we're also generally taking a longer look at our pipeline and our product portfolios. And I think this is a good chance to say, so what's going to be evolutionary and just keep incrementally getting improved, and what's going to be revolutionary? And we really couldn't have a better speaker for this topic today, our guest. Kjetil is the Executive Vice President for Strategy and Product Management at Nordic Semiconductor. If you're not familiar with Nordic, they are at the very top tier of wireless hardware manufacturers. In fact, many would argue that they are at the pinnacle of the tier in terms of providing hardware connectivity. So this is somebody who spends his day full-time thinking about and working on what comes next. And I think a lot of time also talking with many people in many industries using wireless. So quickly, we'll post this webinar on YouTube by tomorrow. We'll get a summary blog out. Let us know if you have questions. So with that, Kjetil, welcome on behalf of myself, Bernhard, and Buddy. Maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of your career background, or as I like to say, what is it that you did that stuck you in the seat here today with us?
Yeah, that's a good question. And thanks for having me, Randy and Bernard. So Kjetil Holstad and I stumbled into semiconductors, it's 23 years ago when someone at my high school and college came and asked for people to join a local semiconductor company known as Atmel. So that's where I started my career, and I just loved working with semiconductors since, and I've had various roles. For the last 8 years, I've been working in Nordic Semiconductor. Started out taking care of our Bluetooth portfolio, and now expanded into corporate strategy and looking over all our products, no matter what wireless technologies or what complementary type of technology it is. So just very, very excited to be here. And I mean, this medical topic is something that Nordic keeps close. I mean, there's a lot of customers of ours in this space. We've been working on this for a long, long time. So it's just exciting to be here. So thank you again for the opportunity.
It's great to have you. So can you tell us a little bit about Nordic, where you're based? What are your high-level products and services? How big are you?
Sure. Yeah, so Nordic Semiconductor, we're a fabless European semiconductor company, headquartered out of Norway, but have R&D and a global presence. We have R&D offices in the US and across Europe and into Asia, and obviously sales offices everywhere. Probably known as the Bluetooth company, so we're doing very, very good in Bluetooth low energy. I've been doing that since 2006. I was part of defining that standard, what turned into Bluetooth Low Energy, and has kind of enjoyed that success ever since. But over the recent years, we also expanded into cellular technology. We have, through acquisition, gone into Wi-Fi. We've started to do power management circuitry for some obvious reasons that we probably will get into, and just expanded upon that. And we're a company that think we're slightly different, to where we have strategic pillars that are catered towards developers and ease of use and things that we just think this industry is needing, right? And then we're looking at more than semiconductors. Is how can we help customers solve their problems, no matter what their problems is. So perhaps gravitating more and more towards becoming a solution provider and someone who's helping our customers with a lot of their different things. So we're around 1,500 people worldwide. So we're still fairly small, but we like to fight upwards towards the big ones. So yeah.
So if you're more solution oriented, just to clarify, does that mean you're moving from sort of being a hardware manufacturer to also a software company and a services company, or what does that feel like?
It's a good question. No, it means basically helping solve problems from a customer, have an idea of what they want to do. So you want to be there all along through their evaluation, through development, through pre-production runs and into production, whether it's with proper SDKs or tools or support, or cloud-based services for device management and security updates and firmware over the air, doing mobile application for people who want to use phones as a gateway. So just building up the entire ecosystem and things that customers need to get solutions into the market, and may have them in the market. For some of our customers, especially in the medical space, this is applications that's run for 5, 10, 15 years before the end of life. And you need to be there and think about all those steps, and don't leave people hanging just as soon as they have purchased 1 million devices or 10,000 devices, whatever it is. You have kind of an obligation to be there all along.
No, we appreciate that. In fact, I think we made a reference in a prior webinar. There's still about 2 or 3 iron lungs in use in the US. These are medical devices that have been making people breathe basically for 50 years, individual devices that are still good. So, the longevity part we appreciate. Okay, and so for those people who don't have a background in sort of chips and hardware, don't I just go to Intel or NVIDIA or one of these companies that I hear about to get this? Like, why is there a wireless hardware company?
There's wireless hardware companies out there because to connect things and what's called the Internet of Things and connect many things, I mean, it's something we make easy for our customers, but it's not necessarily easy for us to make, right? So we do our best to hide away some of the complexity, but doing RF is hard, and especially if you want to do low power wireless. And a lot of the applications in the medical space, they don't have access to a lot of powers. They are not necessarily mains operated, right? And so if you want to have something that is really, really low power and just good connectivity that is robust and interoperable with everything that's out there, you need to have focus and you need to have dedication. And that's kind of where Nordic came from. It's just that hardcore dedicated to wireless and looking at what we can do in terms of low power, and just continuing to push and raise the bar and make sure that also the standards and the things evolve, right? So you talk about Bluetooth. Bluetooth Low Energy started out as Bluetooth 4.0, and now we're at 5.4. So the standards keep evolving, and that is thanks to a company like ourselves that are dedicated to this space and pushes technology forward. So yeah, you can obviously go to Intel and go to NVIDIA, etc. But every problem typically requires a dedicated solution, and there is in the semiconductor industry not a one time fits all. There are certain technologies that are better for certain things, and you cannot just invest in something very general purpose when you want to do wireless. So it requires focus and dedication. I guess that's part of the equation.
You won't go to Ford, GM, or Chrysler for a bulldozer.
Correct.
Tractor, right? It's a specialty need. Okay, and
although I don't like to compare us against bulldozers. Sometimes you need a bulldozer. Sometimes you need a little bit more sophistication.
There you go. There you go. So, and just because you have a really cool title, Senior Vice President for Strategy and Product, what do you do? I mean, you just go in the office and pull up a whiteboard and look at it and write down smart things. Like, what is the nature of that job? Because I think it will help people understand kind of your perspective as we drill in a minute.
Yeah, no, I think it's not different than everyone else. You come into the office and now I'm going to think about what we're going to do in the next 10 years. And you open up your computer and, oh, there's an email with a red flag associated to it. And there you go, your day is gone, right? No, but being part of the strategy and products and thinking what we need to do, we need to be out there talking to our customers, talking to industry players, just trying to figure out what's going on and start to paint a picture of what is needed the next 3 to 4, 5, 6 years, right? In semiconductor, the cycles are really long when you talk about hardware. It takes us somewhere between 3 to 5 years to introduce a new generation of our chipsets. And so you need to be forward-looking, and the only way to do this is to be out on the road, talk to a lot of customers, talk to a lot of application areas and dive into those. Obviously spend a lot of my time just reading, browsing the internet, looking at what competitors are doing, looking at what startups are doing, and then just talk to as many people as I can, like something like this, where I have the chance to talk to you guys and listen to what you have to bring to this space.
I've already gotten value from this webinar because it actually makes me feel much better to know that even an SVP of strategy has a hard time carving out time just to think and not be interrupted by Slack and email and text and a barking dog, which you may hear here at some point. Those kind of things. Okay, so let's drill in a little bit into healthcare and how we use Bluetooth. Can you maybe kind of tell us a little bit with Bluetooth or just wireless in general, I guess, for medical devices? Although, to be fair to people, we're going to focus less on sort of the hospital/industrial space and more on sort of the consumer home space in here. But how did this start with Bluetooth Classic? What kinds of applications did you see? What kinds of trade-offs were people making? Those kinds of things.
Yeah, no, so the old classical Bluetooth was made for human input type of devices and then merged into, let's say, audio use cases. So relatively set use cases where there were certain things that it could solve and solve well. I think when it started to become interesting, and this was probably in the mid-2000s, is when you started to see that there was something where you could see a need for more and more devices to become connected, right? You got the introduction of the iPhone, and you saw the world was rapidly changing in terms of people having access to various type of equipment, and which is so much happening in technology. And one of the shortcomings with the early versions of Bluetooth was it was made basically for high activity wireless links. So things that you were either streaming audio or you were using a mouse that needs to be on and sending something every time or all the time. And there was a need for something that was low duty cycle, small amount of data, and where the battery lifetime perhaps was measured in years and not days or months. And that's where kind of Bluetooth Low Energy, which is where Nordic became big, started out. Started out in a lot of it was around sports, which is kind of a predecessor to a lot of the medical stuff we see today. So sports sensors like heart rate monitors and power meters, etc. So Bluetooth Low Energy came out that, and it kind of was part of the Bluetooth spec and the standard, but it was something on its own. So Bluetooth Low Energy was just something new, using the same umbrella and somewhat of the same radio, but not fully. And where things like very, very low power, low duty cycle, sleep currents, all those things matters. And that kind of was the evolution. And then lo and behold, in 2010, 2011, Apple included Bluetooth Low Energy in their phones. And since then, it's just been one of the fastest growing wireless technologies we have ever seen, right? And if we fast forward to where we are today, I think Nordic, we track hundreds of different verticals and applications where now Bluetooth Low Energy is present. Even within the medical space, you see tens and tens of applications where Bluetooth Low Energy now is being used by patients and consumers on a daily basis, whether it's continuous glucose monitors or SpO2 measurements or pacemakers or hearing aids, you name it.
Yeah, it's been a very convenient thing, really, right? When you look at it, the fact that those smartphones are in in everyone's pockets, right? Really all over the world, and now you have a way of getting information out of a device or connecting to a device, so a patient or a user, whoever is connecting to that, can get information and can do more with that device. And then on the side, since that smartphone is connected to the internet, we can get information out that was potentially really, really difficult to get out, and use that for improving the device or algorithms learning for changing and updating therapy. So very powerful in that regard, and it's no wonder that's taken off really over the last 10 years.
It's very interesting, your story, that in the early years, you're basically saying Bluetooth was immediately applied to things measuring the human body. They just were not medicine or clinical grade, as we say. They were wellness, sports, activity things, but you wouldn't make a surgical decision based on it. Or let me put it this way. If I showed up as a medical device manufacturer at the Bluetooth 1.0 sessions, before 1.0 was out, and said, I'm so excited for this because the first thing I'm going to do is take a computerized implant and stick it on people's spines, and it's going to send electrical signals into their spine to control their whole central nervous system, and I'm going to control that using Bluetooth on the outside. Would you all been like, whoa?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people would go, wait a minute. And it's always for good and bad, and that's why things, take a little bit longer time in this space. If you're going into things that are life critical, etc., there's just so many more problems that you need to tackle, and Bluetooth 1.0 or 2.0 or 4.0 or whatever. You need to make sure that the standards are robust and that it actually works, right? With Bluetooth 4.0, when Bluetooth Low Energy came in, you had the problem of every time there was a new Android version coming, things started to break apart, right? And then you had to, there was phones needed to be upgraded and devices in the field needed to be upgraded. And that happened every time there was new Android phones or new chipset coming into the Android phones. Things were kind of shaky for a long, long while. So yes, I think I would be skeptical initially, and probably not something. If the doctor was saying to myself, okay, you have a pacemaker and it's the initial versions of whatever wireless technology, I would have said, oh, wait a minute.
And any
because you need that critical mass, you need to flush out all of these issues. You need to make sure that you have something that is robust and reliable and secure, etc. And the only way to get that is to ship millions, if not billions, of devices and just prove out the technology.
So let me ask one more related question before we jump forward. In our pre-discussion, Bernhard and Kjetil, you both had a conversation about like wireless is amazing, Bluetooth's amazing, but ultimately nobody goes to the store and generally says, does the new iPhone have Bluetooth 5 in it? It's a means to an end. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because it's such a fundamental infrastructure thing, but people just want it to work, right? They just want to move data from A to B. How do you both look at that?
Yeah, no, I think for me I mean, if you're a product manufacturing, you shouldn't necessarily care, oh, I need Bluetooth, or I need cellular, or I need Wi-Fi or something. No, what you typically need, I need a device that everyone can connect out of the box and easily. So, and piggyback on some infrastructure out there so you can reach the devices. The underlying technologies shouldn't really matter. I mean, in the end it does, because they have different aspects and there are different things with them. But in the end, what you want to do is, if you have a fall detector, you want to make sure that if someone falls over, that message reaches whoever needs to get that message. So it's about infrastructure. Like you say, it's about getting that data from A to B, whether it's through a C and a D, sure, but you just need to get that data back and forth. And that's what matters for the application. Then obviously you go into, okay, the fall detector needs to survive on a battery for 6 months, then you start to narrow down the options, etc. But it's interesting because everyone thinks, okay, all the phones in the world now have Bluetooth, and it's such an easy and available technology. But if I go home to my mother and ask her to pair a Fitbit to her phone, she's going to struggle, no matter how easy they think it is, right? And she will fumble. And okay, what do you do then? How do you make sure that your products, which is again this fall detector as an example, works in all homes, in all cases, with all different people? Yeah.
It's interesting. I almost, this isn't fair, but I almost have this vision of, like from Big Bang Theory, when Sheldon Cooper, the scientist who has no social graces, comes down to the engineering lab and says, oh, you're the Oompa Loompas of science. We make the chocolate. You're just the Oompa Loompas, you're the engineers. But you're nowhere without them. Okay. So good background and base for today. Looking forward. So if you're designing medical devices, producing them, testing them 10 years from today, so that'd be 2033 going on 2034. That just boggles my mind. What's it going to feel like when you're using, wireless technologies, Bluetooth or otherwise? What's that future going to look like? Is it going to just be faster and less power, or are there other things coming?
No, I think, it's very hard to predict what standard's going to be around 10 years from now. And I think my only prediction is there's going to still be a lot of different options for people who want to make a medical device. And they have to do trade-offs between all the different parameters. But I do think we have come really, really far in terms of making globally available infrastructures that allow people to connect seamlessly into some sort of background, a backbone where the device setup and commissioning and joining networks are just seamlessly. So you probably get devices shipped to your home, you open it up, and it just works. Whether it's measuring something or it's a drug delivery of some kind of things. Seamlessly, it just works. And I think that's where we need to, or that's where, for this to become what we want to become, it needs to happen. It just needs to be way more easy than it is today.
So let me clarify, when you're saying it just works and needs to be easy, because as medical device manufacturers, we're kind of in your shoes. We spend a lot of time making the Bluetooth just works for the patients and providers, but it doesn't just work for us. So does that mean that if there's going to be all these other technologies, it's going to be infinitely more complex and hard, and there's going to be more testing, or should it hopefully get easier for us as manufacturers along the way as well?
No, I think it's going to get easier for manufacturers along the way as well. And taking one example, inside the Connectivity Standard Alliance that was used to run the Zigbee Alliance and now is running the Matter ecosystem, where Apple and Google and Amazon come together to make a smart home that is standardized across ecosystems. I mean, inside there's now an initiative to have connected health defined across. So you can piggyback on the infrastructure there. And if you're a device maker, you're adhere to a specification and it just piggybacks on some infrastructure that is available, whether it's from these companies or others. So I think through standardization and through working together in the industry, we're going to solve some of that complexity and making it easier, right?
Yeah.
We're probably going to make it easier also in terms of, okay, you have problems with Bluetooth and phone connectivity, but what if there is no phone, right? How do you seamlessly transition from one technology to another based on availability around you, right? Perhaps you have to sacrifice some of your budget on power, but then again, you can connect through Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or cellular or any other new technology that might come, and you do that seamlessly based on what's around you. So technology that is smart enough to know what kind of infrastructure is around it and just use those. And my bet is that everything is IP based, everything is end-to-end secure, where a lot of the things that we struggle with today are just gone. It's an IP address and it reaches it from wherever you are in the world. You can reach those devices and make sure you access the information that you need.
Yeah, I think the general trend, right, in hardware, software, in the Internet of Everything is we've been able to abstract and encapsulate more and more, right? And so that's, I think, is certainly one of the things that is going to continue. And we've seen this, one of the things I think that Nordic does really well is making it easier for developers. That's a lot of sort of, here is an SDK, rather than reinventing the wheel every time. We have things and we have ways of testing for developers. I think I remember, a few years ago, we were working with Nordic chips, but we were also working with chips from other manufacturers. And well, of course, Nordic has, over-the-air updates well worked out. But a different manufacturer did not have that. It was surprising. It was another large manufacturer. This is one of these things where eventually they did get that. But I think sort of that process of staying ahead in terms of the software and encapsulating those things, making it easier so you don't have to think about so many of these things is one of those areas that I think will continue along the way. And then, the other side that you mentioned in terms of being able to seamlessly move between different types of wireless connectivity, I think is really important. I think as well for medical devices, if that connectivity is critical and you lose that connectivity, it's good to have a backup. It's good to have multiple backups. And that if you have that and you can really count on that connectivity, that means that more and more critical things can potentially be facilitated over wireless networks as well.
So
Yeah.
could
I think what you're saying there in terms of making things easy, available, and using over-the-air upgrades as an example, where Nordic put in a lot of effort. But I think it shouldn't stop at Nordic. I think as you standardize these solutions, it shouldn't matter if you have Nordic or a competitor's chipset. The over-the-air upgrade should work across, right?
Right,
so moving
exactly.
up and just standardize more of these elements will for sure happen, and will have to happen for this to scale to where we want it to scale, right? And we Nordic, we applaud initiatives that are standardizing how to do this, because we think we're just scratching the surface of what wireless technology can do today, and solving some of these problems, which is beneficial for everyone.
So maybe could you walk us through like an example to help people understand a little more, you're talking about the seamless thing. So like today, for instance, a great company out there we got to work with, Nanoware. They have shirts with sensors embedded in them for, you can correct me, but it's cardiopulmonary monitoring, right? Really neat stuff, really high grade, really neat stuff, all kinds of great applications. Right now, I think you put on your shirt, you then download the app, you install it, you create the account, you then do some kind of a pairing process to get them to sync and talk, and that's it. And then basically when the shirt needs to talk to something, it talks to your phone, and your phone needs to be there and ready, I think is the basic story. What could that look like differently in 10 years?
No, I think, I mean, and there are certain people who use that today, right? You can use the Wi-Fi to just sense, is there a Wi-Fi network here? And if it is, you have a back channel over Wi-Fi where, okay, if you cannot connect to the phone for whatever reasons, you have a backdrop into Wi-Fi, or something that is called a thread network using thread radios. So you basically during your development and during things, you basically embed multi-protocol capabilities, and the process that you are doing here, where you pair to a phone, perhaps that one also enables a backdoor through the Wi-Fi into the product again. So you have those different options, and the products can be smart enough to sense, am I connected to a phone, or am I connected to a home network, or am I connected to over some cellular links, right?
So is it reasonable to think that a local device that used to use Bluetooth to connect a physical medical device to a smartphone, they might just bypass the local and just both go through 5G cellular built in?
That's what I was saying. So there's applications today where if they can, they will use Bluetooth, but if the Bluetooth is not there, they send the data over cellular radio, and then you just straight on the cellular infrastructure. So there's you just bypass the entire phone. And those type of products exist today. And basically you ship products that are pre-commissioned to the internet. You get them home, you just strap your whatever you want to strap on yourself, and it's connected. It can be accessed by a doctor or whoever wants to see the data.
I think it's really important to sort of at some point in the past, Bluetooth was kind of the only convenient way for people to, get data off of a device, to the internet, right? But if your use case has no value for the user of the smartphone, you really just want to borrow their internet connectivity, it's really hard to sort of get them to be your modem, essentially, right? So if that's your use case, it's not a very good use case for Bluetooth with a smartphone. If, on the other hand, the smartphone user is connecting so that they get the data and that they can then potentially change settings on the device, etc., then that's a good use, with cellular as maybe some other way of connecting in case for whatever reason that's not working, but most of the time that's a pretty good connection. If what you're doing instead is, really, I don't care about that user for my purposes, really, I just want to know, where is this device, what is it doing, and it's between manufacturer, between someone who is not directly there with a device, then cellular is with 5G at least has gotten more and more viable as that infrastructure has been rolled out.
Yeah.
So,
but I think also, Randy, you talked about, is there a revolution or an evolution of things? And I think there's a lot of things that will just gradually get better, right? With every new standard of Bluetooth, things get incrementally better on power consumption. I think people are starting to figure out how do you deal with just connectivity in general, right? So the initial Bluetooth case was the device to the phone. And then people understand, oh, if I have all this data on my phone, I can push that to the cloud, and you can start to analyze multiple users, etc. And now they're starting to figure out that pushing all the data up into the cloud might not be sustainable. So now they want to move decisions back again towards the device. So that's where you have edge type of compute and artificial intelligence and machine learning on devices. So you can take, for security reasons or latency reasons or just simply cost reasons, you want to have decisions that are as close to the sensor as possible. And those things will just continue to evolve, and probably fairly rapidly now with what we're seeing, especially on AI and machine learning. And then there's the never-ending question about privacy and security, where we just have to keep pushing, because people who want to exploit networks and connectivity, etc., will also just keep getting better. So staying ahead in the game of making sure that things are secure and robust, whatever the wireless standard is just going to continue to evolve. So I think it will be a combination. And I'm also wondering if 10 years from now, because today we're just very phone centric, whether or not there's a new device in everyone's life that we haven't thought about yet that is replaced or put the phones a little bit on the side. So that's going to be interesting.
In 10 years, everything will be the same, just more so.
Perhaps.
Well, I think the revolutionary part is hard to predict, right? And it's not necessarily always, oh, there is a great invention. It is very often a set of things that come together to change things, right? The big thing that happened around 2008 or so was the iPhone, and everything afterwards is sort of that building on kind of the internet, and generating all of this extra connectivity really was complementary to a bunch of other things. There will be something that happens. It could have happened last year and we don't even know about it yet, right? Or it could be happening in another 10 years or so. But typically these things take, these cycles are not 2-year cycles. They're 10, 20-year, or sometimes even longer cycles for something to get adopted, run its course, and then something else becomes more important that's on top of that. Complementary.
So I think part of what we will see in terms of revolution is not necessarily towards the wireless technology or what we're doing from the chip side. It's what technology can do in our space in terms of home patient monitoring and etc. Right, and just see what has happened with in the wearable space, where you now have FDA approved medical grade blood oxygen monitoring. There's so much happening in the continuous glucose monitoring and the insulin delivery, and all of these things will just we have just scratched the surface of what technology will bring here. And I think that's where we will see a revolution in terms of what kind of data are you able to get by yourself with devices you wear or have close to your body. It's just amazing to see when you're out there talking to all the customers today, just seeing the innovation in this space. And things are happening really, really fast. So I think that's what excites me, at least.
So that's great. And I think that's really exciting. There were 2 terrific questions that came in about 15 minutes in the conversation that I'm going to do a little intro to, but I think are really good. These are the people actually doing the work today going, all right, hang on a second. So when the creator of The Simpsons 20 years ago or something came out with his new show Futurama, I remember reading an interview with him, and they said, so what's the future like? And he goes, oh, everything we thought was going to happen is going to happen. We'll have flying cars and, commercial space flight and teleportation and printing food. He goes, but it'll be just like today. None of it's going to work very well. So we have 2 questions here that I think are in that vein in a respectful way. One is, I was kind of curious on this panel's thoughts on the reliability of BLE. If a company like Apple has to build such customized workflows around it to get it to mostly work, and they still have problems, like how many times I have to stick my AirPods back in their case on a daily basis, what improvements do you see coming to help us? And then a similar question, I'll give them to you at once. Bluetooth is enormously complex. much more complex than it needs to be. There's obviously thousands of parameters the Bluetooth system needs to handle under the hood, but almost none of those issues matter to the developer trying to make a connection. When will Nordic make a smart platform that just writes all the code for me after answering a few questions? Maybe I need a LLM, like a ChatGPT interface, a chatbot. Hey, Nordic, write this Bluetooth connection code.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So I'll tackle them one by one. I think in terms of Bluetooth not working and not working reliable, and I agree. I mean, that's where when I started, I said RF is still kind of hard, right? And when you put the protocol and you put all the permutation of things you can adjust and tweak, it is challenging. And it's not only about what we do as a chipset provider and what we do at the software level or what we do together with someone like Orthogonal on the phone side. It's also about how do you develop your product? How good is your antenna? What kind of things you see? So there's just so many things. And not all of them are Bluetooth related. Some of them are just RF. I think the answer to this is, okay, we just need to make sure that we start to standardize more on this. So yeah, Bluetooth low energy, great, has a lot of stuff, but how do you define a certain medical device on top of using Bluetooth low energy or any other wireless standard? And how do you define the setup and making devices work together? How do you define the over-the-air upgrade? How do you find and just keep on churning? And how do you make sure that you have interoperability testing and things, put infrastructure in place, so when you have your product, you can actually go and for lack of better word, certify that it works according to a certain standard. And then when everyone do that, you kind of put the level up in terms of making sure things work. Yeah, I think that's the perhaps not the best answer for the question, and perhaps they wanted something simple. And also the standards are evolving, right? So today there's Bluetooth 5.4, and I can tell you where there's now being worked on the next 2, 3, 4 generations of Bluetooth as well, right? It just continues to evolving and improve. And the next question is also very, very good in terms of when can we just have ask something to write the code. And I think Nordic, as everyone else, when we started to see the ChatGPT and the large language models being released at the end of last year, this is going to change a lot of stuff in terms of our space. And obviously, at some point, yes, there could be large language models trained on all the Nordic and all our competitor software and all the GitHub and everything out there, where you can start to just say, okay, I want to have use a Nordic device and I want to connect to a phone, help me write that code. And I think if you try to do that today, you will actually see that you will get very, very far using something like ChatGPT today, and a standard Nordic or one of our competitors' part.
And then you could extend that.
The surface there.
Yeah. Then you could extend that where you have your same model also look at all the edge cases and build out simulations of those things and see if the code that was written handles those edge cases well.
Yep.
And you can sort of have multiple, cycles of improvement going on at the same time. Right.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point, Bernard, because I mean, a lot of the stuff that we do and our customers are doing is when you have your application up and running, you start to test it. You have to test it for all the different use cases: low battery, cold temperature, high temperature, clock frequency, jitters, and whatnot. You have to just start making sure that this works. And you can only test and test and test and test and believe you get to 100% coverage, but perhaps you can use AI and other things to find the holes that you didn't cover and the use cases and just improve your code. So I think we will see a lot of good things coming in that space, but that just help everyone making better code, more robust code.
Especially if everyone is...
We're not there yet. If you're lazy, I think you can do yourself just very, very wrong if you just blindly trust everything, but we will get there.
especially if everyone is willing to share their data.
Of course. Yeah, no, I think, and not gonna brag too much about Nordic, but I think one of the reasons why Nordic became the #1 popular Bluetooth low energy company in the world, providing technology, is we shared everything in the open from day one. If you want to cater to developers, you need to be open and available. All our code is open and available. We do all our customer support and our tech support out in the open so everyone can see it, and just accumulate a lot of knowledge around Nordic devices. So yes, and if you go to something like ChatGPT today and ask a question around Nordic, or you will find a lot of answers. If you go to ask the same question with some of our competitors that are behind NDAs and just not very available, you won't get that much help, right? Because it's trained on public data. And you're absolutely correct. People need to share the data. People need to be less protective and more thinking of sharing and opening and standardize things and move forward. That's what's going to be beneficial in the medical space and the Internet of Things in general.
Just as a quick technical reminder to anybody who wants to go to ChatGPT now and ask questions about Nordic technologies, the answers you get will be state of the art as of what, like 2018, 2019, but not as of
something like that. And so don't trust it. Things are happening fast in this place. So,
okay.
yeah.
So
I mean, I think one other thing that if we look at this technology, there are lots of complex cases that you have to deal with, and a lot of, frankly, moving parts on all sides that you're dealing with. That being said, the longer we go on, think about it like airplanes, right? Airplanes and automobiles are continually more and safer and safer, because there's a long history of of accidents, learning from them. How do you design products and work through that? I think the same thing happens with technologies like Bluetooth, with things like smartphones. Part of what is also happening is that we are doing more sophisticated things over those networks, which results in new problems that we did not have 3 years ago, 5 years ago as well. So
your eyes are bigger than your stomach, as my grandmother used to say.
I mean, it's natural. Oh, this is now available. We can do this. There are things we can do now, over cellular, over Bluetooth, between different parts of a connected ecosystem that we weren't thinking about, and certainly not in the medical space, which tends to be more cautious than, say, remote swimming pool management or something like that, right?
Yeah. And also just because technology develops, right? I mean, if you look at the Nordic device that came out in 2012, it was relatively simple, single core running at around 50 megahertz or something, that had a Bluetooth, relatively simple Bluetooth software stack. And today we are at our 4th, 5th generation of Bluetooth low energy devices. We have so many cores in our devices that I've stopped counting. There are security domains. Nordic this summer acquired a company for doing machine learning acceleration on our chips. So the complexity of what a chip can do today versus what it could do 10 years ago is just mind-blowing when you start to think about it. And of course, that helps product developers making better products and push innovation. But the complexity also goes up. So how do you make sure that you do this while maintaining a relatively good ease of use and hide some of that complexity? And again, so that product developer can focus on their problems and not like one of the questions, solving the Bluetooth connection issues, etc. We need to get them focused on their innovation and not improving Bluetooth or any other wireless connectivity. So how you do that when the technology just evolves and becomes more complex? It is a challenge, but Nordic works hard every day on trying to make sure that we make it as easy as possible.
Did you have any big product announcements you wanted to make right now? was getting
I
excited
think
when you were
Nordic
done.
has done quite a few product announcements already this year, and we're excited about those.
I was hoping we get it. Okay, so there's several topics that are more interesting niche ones that we'll cover because we still have time. We're still getting questions, but there's one key question before anybody starts dropping off at 50 after that I want to make sure we get in. You're talking to people building medical devices using wireless, using Bluetooth. Tell us, please, for the love of God, stop doing what?
Stop saving nickels and dime, and make sure you have enough memory on the chip to do proper over-the-air update, not only for the things that you can envision today, but the things that might show up 2, 3, 4 years down the road. We see again and again companies trying to save a quarter on a chip, thinking they can get away with less memory and less power on the device, and then 2 years later there's a security issue or there's something flawed with their code and they have struggled to update it. And it just make sure you have enough memory, make sure you have enough power to make sure you can keep your devices upgradable for their lifetime.
I would second that. Looking at it from a from a developer perspective, right? Software is fairly mutable, more so than hardware. Things are going to change. You're going to come up with new ideas. There are new things that your customers are going to request or that you will want to do. Typically, you will want to be able to do this, using software. And so you need the flexibility really on both sides. On the smartphone side, well, those people are likely upgrading those smartphones on a regular cycle. And so you're going to have that availability. But really, if you have to say, we're going to have to, take out this chip, put in a new chip, recode, do all of this kind of stuff, the pennies that you saved on your chip are are going to be definitely outweighed by all of the maintenance costs, the software costs, etc. Those chips aren't going to live forever, obviously, and so you are going to have some upgrade cycle, but you can really stretch that out by not being at the very bottom end of this. So
Yeah.
So I assume at some point you see customers or people you lose the bid on the first time, but they come back for the second version of the device and like, all right, we got to do it this time. We paid last time, you were right.
Yeah, all the time. And also just, I mean, Nordic, you have different tiers of devices, and we see companies starting out at the lower tier and they come back, oh shit, we need more flash, and we just bump them up to more capable devices. Happens all the time.
Yeah. Especially as you're trying to do more complex things with your connectivity. And inevitably, that's what happens. If your devices, a connected device is successful, people are going to want more things. Your competitors are going to be doing new adding new functionality, and you need to be prepared for that.
I'll give one example if I can, Randy. And I mean, in our space, machine learning and AI is fairly new, but thanks to tiny ML and things that Google have started to push, those things you can do on relatively constrained devices with relatively limited memory, all of a sudden you can start to doing fairly smart machine learning capabilities on Nordic devices. And the people who had enough memory and available processing on their devices could just put new life into the products by enabling much smarter functionality. And the people who were limited on memory, they are left at the train station just looking at, oh, what happened? We need to bring a new product into the market or something, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Can you clarify something you just said? When you're saying that people can now do AI ML processing on Nordic devices, and you all made an acquisition in that area, that's not necessarily processing of computing related to wireless. It could just be kind of any kind of processing.
Yeah. So Nordic, and I think there's very few companies now who only does wireless. I mean, we are very often the main application processor in the application. So we run the entire application and the wireless. So whether it's a wearable device that wants to count your steps, and whether you're driving a car or sits in an airplane or whatever it is, and want to measure your sleep patterns and all that stuff, all of that can now run on a Nordic device. And with the acquisition that I was talking about, the chips of tomorrow from Nordic can do that even better.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit about why is that?
We want to be the brain of any of our customers' products.
Can you share anything about use cases you're hearing about of people, medical applications for this kind of stuff? Because it's really interesting idea that you basically using your wireless chip as your chip, period. What can you do out at the edge? What can you do on your Internet of Medical Things device?
Yeah, so whether if you're a sensor, you can run fairly advanced noise cancellation and remove noise from your analog data, so you have a cleaner signal for whatever you want to measure. If you want to do things like heart rate variability using optical sensors, making sure that you have that when a device is moving around on an arm is very, very hard, but you can use advanced computational power to get rid of all the noise and sit with a clean heart rate data that you can do these kind of things with. And all the sleep algorithms out there, they run on Nordic devices. So we have a customer called Whoop in the US to make health monitoring wearable devices that runs on Nordic, which is great.
So you could.
I think we've seen this this trend happening, right? And up until recently, the trend kind of stopped at the smartphone, right? It's sort of like initially algorithms up in the cloud that requires you to sort of get the data up into the cloud and have the processing up there. It's elegant to have the processing in the cloud, but you have the connectivity issues and how much data you have to get up there. Moving it to the edge, having it on the smartphone for some use cases gives you a lot of benefit. But then again, up until recently, pushing it further onto the device wasn't really particularly feasible. But as we know, with Moore's law, these things really do keep getting better and better, more and more powerful, so that then you can do more things on that device chip. And again, you're in many ways removing complexity of the connectivity and having to push data across. There's still going to be reasons why you want some things on the device, some things on the smartphone, and some things up in the cloud. There are use cases for each of those things.
Perfect. And it's just to give an idea of kind of what you could do. I mean, on a Nordic device today, you can run the PC games that you could run 10, 15 years ago. Had to use a personal computer to run. You can now run those same computer games on a Nordic chip. So we're doing a lot.
Is that a good analogy? Sort of like what you can do on the smartphone is probably what you could do on the cloud 10 years ago. What you can do on a chip is what you could do on, say, maybe not a smartphone, but on a PC 10 years ago or so.
Yeah. No, it is good, and we kind of see that things that you had to use a phone for 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, you now can run on let's say Nordic type of devices, where we now have my first PC was a 60 megahertz Pentium something, and our latest generation devices is a quadruple core 320 megahertz that runs on a couple of milliamps point cell batteries for years, right? It's just mind blowing. And so we do see a trend of things that started out in phones trickle down to a Nordic type of device.
I think in my kid bought
partitioning and wireless and computational power.
I think one of my nieces or nephews just bought a pack of Pokemon cards that has more computing power in it than what it took to get a man to the moon. So, okay, so let's loop back, buddy. I wanted to pull you in. Let's talk cybersecurity. So, with all, it's great that we'll be able to jump around, but does that essentially mean leave no attack surface behind? Like, is it going to get lots more complex to lock these things down? Or do you think that the tooling will improve so it'll be the same amount of effort for a lot more wireless options at once? How are you all looking at that? And it's for Kjetil and for Buddy both. Like, how do you see that?
Yeah, no, I can. I mean, we see that the people who want to attack and exploit, they just get smarter, and the cost of the equipment needed is just coming down. So what you had to use $100,000 machine to do, you can now do on a $10 something you buy on the internet, right? So the defense mechanism just needs to be ahead of that. But it's really about the what are you trying to protect for what costs scenarios, right? We talk about this being medical devices, but if it's just a temperature sensor that sends and has no personal data associated to it, perhaps you don't need a very sophisticated level. So depending on what you kind of want to protect. But if you want state of the art today, there's a lot of complexity on Nordic, and then there's complexity on the people who provide the software, and there's complexity on the end product manufacturer as well. And I'm sure Buddy can elaborate on his perspective there as well.
Yeah, I've been in the device security space for a really long time, and it has been interesting to see the evolution of just the documentation. I recently was working on one of our customers' devices that did have a Nordic chipset in it, and I wanted to provide them some guidance on how to implement secure boot with it. And a few years ago, there was no information, and the CPUs didn't really even support that, didn't have a concept of it. But now, Nordic has very detailed website write-ups on enabling firmware signing and secure boot. And it was nice to be able to leverage that. I think like you said earlier, the transparency has been really great, and also the support of secure mechanisms. So it really has been an interesting evolution. One of the things that we always talk about is there's always a trade-off between security and usability. And it's very important to say that if the device is so secure that it can't be used, then your patients don't get benefit.
Yeah. But it's also just have to be clear. Will forever be a continuous evolution. There's no one day where you said, I'm done. Now we're done. We're as secure as it gets, because tomorrow we just need to improve and improve and improve. And I think the good thing is that we're 3-4 years ago, we had to go and talk to our customers and beg them to implement a level of security. But now it seems that both through regulatory and through standards, and people are just much more aware that they need to think about security from day one. So it's and now we can come up to customers that are far more advanced in terms of security thinking than even Nordic, right? So there has something happened in this space for the last 5 years, which is really, really appreciated, because we need to just stay on our toes and continue to move security forward.
So the bar's been raised.
I would actually like to, I'm curious, do you guys have any support in your tooling for SBOMs, for software bill of materials, for the firmware within the Nordic device that a customer can use when they're creating their SBOMs for regulators?
Yeah, so there are things that we're doing, and obviously we're looking into ways to improve that as well. A lot of our latest SDKs are based on an SDK that's called Zephyr, which has an SBOM capable, but there's some Nordic code that we need to provide that comes in addition to that. But yeah, we're helping customers get through regulatory on almost a daily basis. So the answer is yes, but you probably need some help from Nordic to generate that SBOM.
Buddy, maybe could you explain for those on the call who aren't as familiar, why is that a relevant question in MedTech now?
So recently, the FDA has basically started to mandate software bill of materials for regulatory filings for medical devices. So they want to know exactly what is in your firmware and your device, and that includes all the CPUs, that includes a third-party software, the open source software, as well as the things that you create yourself as an MDM. And it's a very rapidly evolving space. So I was curious to see how to approach that with a Bluetooth device, especially because we don't always think about firmware as being part of an SBOM, but it absolutely should be, especially moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other thing, there that the FDA is, certainly looking for is not just a static, here's your SBOM, but then also that you are, actively monitoring what kinds of things, issues that are discovered about those things. If you don't know, or you're not really actively controlling what is in your software, then you won't know that a security hole was just discovered somewhere, et cetera. So the idea of the SBOM as, to some extent as code, right? If you have that in GitLab or GitHub or something like that, then you can also be monitoring those things and see when there are updates and what the nature of those are, and have that as part of your kind of automated or semi-automated monitoring processes to help keep your devices secure.
And it's going to be interesting here as well. I mean, putting together an SBOM for a product, right? It means that you need to make sure that where does the code inside the product come from, right? And then we talked about ChatGPT, where you can go online and you can ask for per certain amount of code. So how do you know the origin of that code, and how do you know what it can and can't do, right? So being conscious in terms of understanding where does the code running on my device come from, it's obvious that we need to get better on that. So yeah, I think we'll see a lot of stuff happening here, and I'm glad to see FDA and others are pushing that forward.
Are you seeing that globally in other industries also, or just MedTech?
Yeah, we see it in other industries as well. So it's medical in the US, but it's various other applications that are, let's say, medical-like, where you care about securities, whether it's infrastructure or smart metering or those kind of applications where there's some value at stake, then it typically starts to come up.
And I guess let me bridge that into a quick question: is in general, is MedTech, in terms of our requirements and our need for safety, are we just like any other safety industry, or do we differ in terms of the conversations you hear?
It's not that different. I think what we're seeing in medical, it's and especially in the US, where it's just more regulatory requirements. I think the scrutiny comes from everyone who have safety on top of the list, right? They all want to push that. But I think what's good with MedTech is that the regulatory is part of pushing things forward here. And things like the FDA set some agenda in terms of device firmware upgrade capabilities. I think they were quite early and starting to mention that products need to be able to be upgradable in the field, right? But it's not that different. I mean, if you're running a insulin pump, it's there are lives on stake, so obviously the bar is high. But other than that, if you're running another pump for another reason in another application, perhaps you care about that same safety. And Nordic is not very big in automotive, but that's another area where it's obvious that these things come up high on the agenda.
And more so, right, as everything is connected and as there are sensors everywhere, I think it's industrial is certainly another area where there's an awful lot of security concerns, rightfully, because you can do a lot. There are potentially a lot of issues that can come out of one failure, as opposed to, say, a medical device. Although, if everything is connected, and you can hack into all these devices, then you can also spread this out to hundreds, if not thousands or tens of thousands of people.
You can, as we say, you know, it's great. You can heal people at scale, but there's also the fear that we could harm people at scale, right?
Right.
So two things, I mean, you know, we're more software focused. I think, Buddy, you guys fell in the middle, but you mentioned two things that I think even software people would be interested in knowing about, just as things going on in the true hardware world of your space. I was wondering if you could just touch on them for a minute. One was sort of environmentalism and sustainability and how you're looking at that. And the other one you talked about was energy harvesting. And I think a lot of people, myself included, are like, oh, wait, that sounds interesting. So
Yeah.
maybe could you just give us a brief tutorial on those two spaces?
Yeah, so obviously the sustainability topic is a big one, but where Nordic contribute, I mean, making sure the devices spend less energy for every new generation. It's a strong focus for Nordic. I mean, Internet of Things, and if all these devices, either the disposable or whatever, throwing away batteries is just something we don't want to happen, right? So making sure that the battery lifetime is just extended to the point, Randy, where, okay, perhaps at some point you can start to harvest the energy that you need and you don't actually have to replace the batteries. And we see customers today, not necessarily in the MedTech, but especially in the industrial space, harvesting from solar, from RF, from movement, or from temperature has already started to come, right? And whether, so you no longer need to replace the battery, replace battery or throw away batteries. And I'm sure we're just starting to scratch the surface of that type of technologies as well. And we will see more and more devices, also in MedTech and ultra low power that can be can run out of available energy. And then obviously for Nordic, there's this whole upstream, downstream supply chain. How do you manage? I mean, we're in a industry that requires a lot of energy to create what's called a wafer and to produce a chip. It's an energy demanding industry. And how do you make sure that we improve that as well? Yeah, it's a long topic, and I'll refer people to nordicsemi.com and read our sustainability report from 2022. But I think in terms of products and what we do, it is that relentless focus on making sure our devices can do more on the same energy for every generation, making sure that you can run smarter decisions locally and don't have to transfer everything wirelessly. Sounds counterintuitive coming from a wireless company, but the less wireless you actually use, the more energy you save. And especially now when we enter into this machine learning, AI, etc. I mean, there was this early idea that everyone for Internet of Things was about putting all the data up into the cloud. But now we're starting to hear about, okay, the energy consumption of running servers in the cloud for ChatGPT, or if it's Bitcoin generation or whatever it is, it costs enormous amount of energy. So perhaps sending all that data up into the cloud was not the smartest thing. So perhaps pushing the decisions and pushing the data back towards the sensor is the smarter thing. And that's also where Nordic tried to help with our type of products.
Well, I think we're sort of at the end of our major topics. We've covered a lot. So we want to thank you. Is there anything that we or the audience didn't ask that they should have asked?
No, not that I can think of. I think we went through quite a lot.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for this. Folks, we will have the videos up. Reach out to any of us afterwards. And we love hearing this stuff. And once again, we have about 40% of our audience still with us at 75 minutes in. So thank you for keeping the tradition up to the end. And we will talk to everybody soon, we hope. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.